absolute value, which is a positive I'm so sure.
No, you're
value of a number. For example, absolute value of -5 would just be 5 because it is 5 spots from 0, and absolute value of 3 would just be 3 because 3 is 3 spots away from 0.
So we have 3 minus the absolute value of -2. So how we're going to solve this is we're looking for the positive value of the -2. So that's just 2. And this is still a minus sign. It's not a negative sign, it's a minus sign. So it's just 3 minus 2, and that will give us 1.
To find this equation on the calculator, you hit second catalog, and the top one is absolute value. So you hit enter, and then you can put any number that you need in. So let's say it's -5. You put the ending parentheses, and you press enter, and it'll give you the absolute value of the number.
Okay. So you can also look at it like this as an algebraic equation. So essentially you use it like, as example, -3. So then you put it in here as -3 squared, which equals to 9. Then you take the absolute value, which would be 3. So the square root. So the absolute value of -3 is 3. And the absolute value's answer is always positive because if you take -3 and square it, it equals 9. And also if you take just +3 and square it, it equals 9. So then when you actually square root it, they both end up to be 3.
So our equation is going to be y equals the absolute value of x. When you put this onto the graph, you're going to just find the distance away from the origin. So when it's -1, the absolute value of -1 is just 1 unit away from 0. So this is going to be just a straight line back to the origin. Now if it's 1, it's the same thing. It's only 1 unit away from the origin. So when it's just 1 unit away, we draw that line back and it creates this V. So if we continue outwards, each of these continually goes back to the origin, creating just a larger V. So now let's say we want to shift our graph to the right. To do this with our equation, we have to put it into y equals the absolute value of x minus 3. To shift anything in absolute value, you have to subtract it. So when we want to move 3 units to the right, we subtract 3. That'll put our origin right at 3. So when we input anything into this, so let's say x is 2, x minus 2 minus 3 is going to be, So now let's put our equation and move it 3 units to the right. So when we find the absolute value of something 3 units to the right, we have to subtract it. So let's put our origin right at 3. To move it 3, we have to subtract 3 units from our absolute value. So when we're trying to find this, we put in 4 for our x value, and the absolute value of 4 minus 3 is going to be 1. So y equals 1. So when we graph that, that's going to put our point right there. And instead of going back to the origin, which was 0 before, we're going to pull it back to our origin now, which is shifted 3 units to the right. So that's going to come back down to there. And our graph will continue for any number that we put into x. So any number you put into here is going to create that same graphical equation that we had before. So now let's move our graph up 4 units. So this is a lot easier than moving it left or right. So we have our original equation. Let's keep our origin at the 3 spot. So that's going to put our origin still at 3. But now, if we want to shift up 3 units, and put it up here, we have to add 3 to the whole equation. So now our origin is moved to the right 3, and now since we put it 3 up here, it's going to move our origin to right here. And since that 3 doesn't change anything in the equation, we're still going to get that V shape from before.